I had a pretty good day. I had my hair done at a salon in the city center. Nothing special, they just cut my hair in several layers to frame my face. But even such a seemingly insignificant change suddenly gave my appearance freshness and an unexpected sense of novelty, as if the remnants of accumulated fatigue of the last few weeks, which I did not immediately realize, had disappeared along with the severed ends of my hair. I put it off for several weeks because of work, as it usually happens when everything except myself is a priority, but finally I managed to make an appointment and carve out those 2 hours. Almost a feat for a woman who lives in a constant schedule of meetings, deadlines, and corporate reports. Coming out of there, I felt like a new woman, despite the heavy gray clouds that hung over the city like a blanket, ready to unfold and shower the streets with fresh, prickly snow. By the way, my name is Barbara. I'm 30 years old, I work as a project manager in a marketing firm, and although it's not the most glamorous job in the world, it allows me to pay my bills, feel stable, and, most importantly, be proud of how well I'm doing without losing face and keeping my inner core in a stream of endless tasks and expectations. I live alone in a modest studio apartment in the eastern part of the city, and although many people might find such a life boring or lonely, I felt comfortable in it. It was in this small, slightly old house that I could be myself without looking back, among familiar things and books that were on the shelves alphabetically. My family situation is, well, it's complicated, as it probably is for many. I have an older sister, Paula, who is 35. She is married to Matteo, and they have a son, Durant, who is 6, and I think they are going to have a second one, either a girl or another boy, because they have a lot of children, if you count all the nephews and nieces of Matteo, who they often take me in on weekends. Paula has always been the golden child in our family. My parents, Gabriel and Celia, have never hidden that they favor her, and despite the years, it is still difficult for me to fully come to terms with how unfairly love, attention, and even Christmas gifts were distributed. When we were growing up, she had a large bedroom with south-facing windows and her own music center, the best Christmas gifts, trips to camp, and most importantly, all that invisible family energy directed at her like a spotlight. I'm used to it, although sometimes it still hurts, not acutely, not painfully, but quietly, from the inside, like an old splinter that can no longer be removed, but which sometimes you still feel. Going back to that winter day, I was walking home from the salon admiring my reflection in the shop windows, not so much out of vanity, but out of a desire to keep the feeling of renewal longer, while my hair still smells of shampoo, and my face seems different, lighter, almost free. The sidewalks were slippery with melting snow, but I wasn't paying attention, too caught up in my reflection and inner monologue. A big mistake. 1 second I was walking, and the next I was in the air. My legs went out from under me, as if in slow motion, and I abruptly, almost with a crash, landed on my right side. The pain was immediate and intense, like a hot knife going through a bone, and I almost screamed. "Oh my God, are you all right?" The woman rushed to me, her face contorted with worry, and her voice trembled. I tried to stand up, not wanting to attract attention or seem helpless, but the moment I shifted my weight to my right leg, a white, red, hot pain shot through me so bright that I almost lost consciousness. I think I hurt my leg, I gasped, gritting my teeth. "Don't move," said the man, who also stopped to help. He looked serious, even professional. "I think it might be broken." The woman introduced herself as Liz, and the man as her husband Dave. They offered to take me to the hospital, which was a godsend because I couldn't walk or even limp to get on the bus. Every attempt to move was accompanied by flashes of pain and panic. At the hospital, I immediately had an X-ray, and the doctor, looking at the pictures, confirmed what I already suspected, a clean fracture of the tibia just below the knee. "You'll need a cast," he said, holding up a picture of a clearly visible crack, "and you won't be able to walk for about 6 to 8 weeks. First they put a splint, then a cast, and the whole process was unpleasant, long, as if the body resisted every touch. But they gave me painkillers, and when it was over, I looked with some strange surprise at my new white accessory, stupidly beautiful, smooth, but at the same time a symbol of helplessness, which from now on defines my movement. The hospital ordered a taxi to take me home. Getting up to my apartment on the third floor turned out to be much more difficult than I imagined, with crutches, with a numb arm, with a head full of noise and fatigue. But in the end, I managed, sweating, exhausted, almost giving up, but still standing in my hallway. The first thing I did was call work. "Barbara." "What happened?" Sarah, my boss, asked as soon as she heard my voice. "I slipped on the ice and broke my leg," I said, trying to sound more cheerful than I felt. "The doctor says that I will be out of action for a while." "Don't worry about the Jenkins project," Sarah said confidently. "We'll manage. Just focus on getting better." It was a relief. At least the job won't be a problem. After I hung up, I looked around the apartment and suddenly realized how difficult the next few weeks were going to be. Everything seemed far away, inaccessible. Even getting yourself a glass of water turned into a challenge requiring an almost acrobatic balance. I tried to cook dinner, but standing at the stove was exhausting, and in the end I just ate crackers with cheese before collapsing on the couch. And then I remembered that I probably should tell my parents about what had happened, despite the fact that nothing in the past suggested that it would bring any benefit or support, just some inner sense of duty, maybe a remnant of a childhood habit of approval, of striving to be noticed, understood, heard, even if it always felt like talking with the door closed. I called them, but, as usual, no one answered the phone. The long rings filled the room like a mockery, like a signal that I was alone again, and I had no one to count on. Instead, I sent a short message, forced, restrained, almost formal, with no hope of warmth in response. "Hi, I just wanted to let you know that I slipped on the ice today and broke my leg. I'll have to spend 6 to 8 weeks in a cast." I wasn't expecting much of an answer. My parents were never caring, at least with me. With Paula, yes, all the attention, all the strength, all the warmth went to her, and what was left, if anything, remained for me. But I still felt like I had to let them know, because despite everything, despite the years of pain, detachment, and rejection, I was still their daughter. About 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated and the screen showed a name that made my heart sink: Mom. "Barbara, you're always so inconsiderate and clumsy," her message began, full of irritation and condemnation, not caring, not empathy, not even interest in my condition, just reproach and habitual severity. "That's what happens when you're not looking where you're going. We can't visit you right now because we're busy renovating Paula's house. Try to be more careful next time. Neither, 'Are you okay?' nor 'Do you need anything?' are just accusations and excuses that I've been drowning in since I was a child." I threw the phone aside, holding back the tears that came to my eyes not from physical pain, but from this invisible, but unbearably familiar mental wound. I do not know why I expected something different, because they have always been like this: cold, dismissive, quick to criticize, slow to kind words. And yet it still hurt. Every time. I hobbled into the bathroom, clinging to the walls and door jambs to keep my balance, brushed my teeth, and somehow managed to get ready for bed, even though my body ached, my leg burned with a dull, constant pain, and my soul felt squeezed out like an old sponge. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I tried to banish unpleasant thoughts about my family, about the eternal injustice, about how little I meant to them, despite all my efforts. Tomorrow will be another day, I told myself, and I'll figure out how to deal with it. I've always done that. I woke up the next morning to the persistent ringing of my phone, which was rattling somewhere on the bedside table, as if deliberately trying to wake me up. My leg was throbbing despite the painkillers, and I groped blindly for my phone. It was Paula. Great. Just what I needed. She didn't even say hello. "Barbara, our house is being renovated by the Federation, so I'm bringing the rent to you today." I blinked, still half asleep, my head in a daze. "Paula, I broke my leg yesterday. I'm in a cast," I mumbled, fidgeting painfully in bed, trying to get up. "Yes, Mom said something about it." Her dismissive tone made my blood boil. "But it doesn't really matter." You don't need two good legs to babysit. Are you serious now? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I can barely move around my apartment. Don't be so dramatic. No one is asking you to play football with him or anything else. Just sit with him, entertain him. Cook his food. You know he only eats homemade food. Cook it. I almost screamed. Paula, I can't stand by the stove. It's painful. Even walking to the bathroom is a challenge. The anesthesia is gone, and my leg hurts like hell. God, you're so selfish. She spat, and the phone went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief. It was low even for Paula. She knew. She saw it. She heard it from her mom. I regularly watched Durant. I didn't refuse. I was there when she asked. The last time he was here, he painted the entire wall of my living room with permanent markers, poured an entire bottle of dishwashing detergent on the kitchen floor to make it slippery like ice, and tried to flush my jewelry down the toilet, just to see if they would disappear. And then I had two working legs to chase after him. 15 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it's Mom. Barbara, she began in her abusive voice, the one I remember from childhood, the one that burned like boiling water. How could you refuse to help your sister? She needs someone to look after Durant. Mom, can you hear yourself? I interrupted her, feeling my voice tremble. I'm at home with a broken leg. I can't physically chase a 6-year-old child. Now. You're just making excuses, she hissed. You're quite capable of keeping an eye on him. Whether one little boy's leg is broken or not is not a reason to abandon the family. I'm too tired and in too much pain for that, Mom. I can't work for at least a month. Please don't call me again with these requests. I hung up before she could answer and, without hesitation, turned off the phone, plunging into silence that was almost painful, but at the same time saving, like a breath of air. I needed peace. Using my crutches, I hobbled to the kitchen, slowly, awkwardly, like a person who has suddenly lost half of his body, and every movement was accompanied not only by a dull pain in his leg, but also by an echo of irritation in his soul. It took me about 20 minutes to make myself a cup of hot chocolate, not because I was doing anything complicated, but because every little thing, every bending over the mug, every step from the stove to the sink and back was a test of patience. As I slowly sipped a hot, sweet drink, trying to feel at least some kind of solace, I couldn't help but feel sad, not the simple sadness that comes from loneliness, but a deeper, exhausting longing that was born from the realization they never once asked how I was doing. They didn't ask, "Do I need anything?" Even a simple phrase, even a polite interest. They only called when they needed something from me, as if I were a resource that was temporarily inactive, but still listed in their family inventory. That evening, when the day had finally slipped into a gray pattern of monotony, pain, and fatigue, the doorbell rang. I walked slowly, with effort, towards her, expecting to see Diane through the peephole with Durant, with reproaches at the ready, with a new demand that this time would have to outweigh even my physical limitations. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw something completely different. Rachel and Jess, my friends, were standing there, their faces both stern and worried. I opened the door in mild confusion. "What are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely surprised by their appearance. Rachel, with her hands on her hips, looked almost indignant. "We just found out from Sarah at work that you broke your leg yesterday. Why didn't you tell us?" I suddenly felt a strange embarrassment arise inside me, the feeling when you seem to be ashamed that you are in a difficult situation, as if you let someone down simply because you need help. "I didn't want to bother you with my problems," I muttered, but Jess interrupted me with a snort. "Bother us? We're your friends, Barbara. That's why we're here." For a second, I tensed up. They looked so serious, and it seemed to me that they were really angry, but then I saw a slight smile on Rachel's lips, and all the tension subsided, melted like snow under the rays of the sun. They rushed past me like a gust of warm wind, with their hands full of grocery bags, and Rachel, already on the move, announced, "We've brought enough food for you to last a week." Jess went straight to the kitchen, continuing, "Everything is either ready to eat or easy to heat up. No cooking, no messing around." I stood there, completely numb, watching them unload containers of soups, casseroles, sandwiches, and salads into my refrigerator, and finally managed to say, "You guys shouldn't have done that." My throat tightened with rising emotions. "Shut up and sit down," Rachel ordered, although her voice sounded gentle, even with a note of caring severity. "We're also going to clean your apartment." I obeyed, sat down on the sofa, carefully putting my foot on the pillow, watching my friends vacuum, dust, gently wipe the bathroom, put my life in order, at least for a while. After cleaning, we ordered pizza and watched an old comedy movie together, the one we've loved since we were students. It was, without exaggeration, the best evening I've had in a long time, not because everything was perfect, but because I felt cared for, accepted, heard, supported. When they left around midnight, Rachel hugged me, this time gently, carefully, trying not to hurt my sore leg, and said, "Call us if you need anything." Seriously. Anything. That's what we mean. Jess added, "Don't be a hero." After the door closed behind them, I was sitting in my clean apartment, surrounded by groceries, warm blankets, and pillows that they had rearranged so that I was comfortable, and I realized that my friends were more of a family to me than my real family had ever been. The next week passed slowly, steadily, like viscous honey on a spoon. My leg was healing, albeit slowly, but I still couldn't walk properly even around the house, and every move on crutches was still accompanied by exclamations of annoyance and quiet curses when I dropped something on the floor. I learned to do better, but it didn't make the path any easier. The job showed understanding, allowing me to do what I could from home, without pressing deadlines. My friends continued to come regularly, bringing food, sitting with me, telling me the latest news, just silently keeping company at times when the silence was especially loud. My sister and parents didn't call anymore, which was unexpected but a pleasant relief. I thought maybe they finally got the message that I wasn't up to them. But exactly 1 week after the first call from Paula, my phone rang again with her number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello, Barbara." Her voice sounded surprisingly cheerful, which immediately alerted me. "Paula," I said neutrally, trying not to sound annoyed. "So Mateo and I are celebrating our 10th anniversary next week," she exclaimed enthusiastically, "and we decided to go to the Maldives for 2 weeks. Isn't it amazing?" "Congratulations," I muttered, still not understanding why she was telling me this. "That sounds nice." "Yes, it will be incredible. Anyway, we're leaving here on Sunday, and we decided not to bother with a babysitter because you're home anyway. You can keep an eye on Durant for 2 weeks while we're gone." I almost dropped the phone. "What, Paula?" "I still have a broken leg. I'm recovering from a serious injury." "Come on, it's been 2 weeks? You're okay. Durant is not a baby. He just needs food, some entertainment, and a place to sleep." "No," I said firmly that I couldn't do that. "I'm sorry, but I'm physically unable to take care of a 6-year-old child right now, especially not for 2 weeks, for 14 whole days, each of which will be for me not only a test to the body, but also of the nervous system, exhausted by pain, sleepless nights, and the need to maintain at least some semblance of order in my house, which I can hardly service even when I'm alone." Paula exploded as if I had insulted her personally, and her voice, filled with venom, sounded through the phone with such force that I had to pull it away from my ear. "You're selfish." She didn't finish the sentence, but I mentally substituted the harshest options, because her tone was more than eloquent. "You're just lying around while I really need help. You've always been lazy, but this is a new downfall even for you." I was shocked, not just by her rudeness, but by the ease with which she, my own sister, negated all my sufferings and difficulties, turning my injury into a convenient excuse, insignificant in her eyes, irrelevant. "Paula," I said, keeping the tremor out of my voice. I literally broke my leg. Why can't Mom and Dad keep an eye on him? They're overseeing the renovation of our house, she snapped, as if that were a valid argument. They can't take care of Durant at the same time when everything is falling into place. I heard it, everything fell into place, and something clicked inside. The repair was more important than me. Their injured daughter, barely able to walk to the kitchen, turned out to be less of a priority than repainting the walls, new cabinets, or retiling. And now it's not even me who's more important, but the convenience of Paula and Matteo's vacation. Everything became painfully clear, to the disgusting piercing ringing in the ears. I'm sorry, Paula, but I can't help you, I repeated with exaggerated calm, but my voice sounded firm, like ice covering a lake before a spring flood. You're ruining everything, she screamed, and for a second it seemed to me that she would grab her hair and start crying like a spoiled child. We've already bought the tickets. That's not my problem, I said, and before she could add anything else, I pressed the end of call button. Almost immediately, my phone vibrated with an incoming message that showed no remorse or attempt to understand. You're ruining our anniversary. We can't get a refund. Why are you being so selfish? I didn't answer any of them because, what was there to say? She didn't listen to the arguments, didn't even hear the obvious. I was in a cast. An hour later, I got a call from my mom. I wanted to ignore him, just leave my phone on the table and pretend I wasn't home, but an inner voice whispered, "Get it over with." I picked up the phone. "Hi, Barbara." My mother's voice was sharp, shrill with barely contained anger, and I immediately regretted my decision. "What's wrong with you? How could you do this to your sister?" "What is it?" "Refuse to look after her child while I'm injured myself?" "You're ruining their anniversary trip with your laziness." This word, this accusation, laziness, seemed to slap me in the face. It's not laziness, Mom. It's a broken leg. Even with a broken leg, you have to help your family, she insisted, not hearing, not listening, not understanding, as if in her world pain and helplessness were a weakness, not a condition that required sympathy. "Family comes first," she said with pathos, as if reading a slogan from a wall. "Is that so? Then why haven't you, Paula, or Dad checked on me since I broke my leg? Why didn't anyone offer to help me?" There was a moment of silence on the other end, tense and awkward, as if my words had taken her by surprise. "That's your problem," she finally said coldly. "Well, then Paula's trip and her baby are her problems," I replied sharply, "not mine. Please don't call me anymore." I hung up the phone. The next few days were blissfully quiet. There were no calls or messages from my family. I began to hope that maybe they really finally understood. I was wrong. On Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends always wrote before they came. Using my crutch, I slowly made my way to the door and peered through the peephole. My heart sank. Paula, Matteo, and Durant were standing there. I opened the door, but without moving aside, I blocked the passage with my body and crutch. "What are you doing here?" I asked Paula. She smiled, but her eyes remained cold and hard, like ice in a whiskey glass. She put her hands on Durant's shoulders and pushed him slightly forward. "We're flying to Florida tomorrow morning," she said, "and we need to do some last-minute shopping." I stared at them in complete disbelief. "I told you," I said slowly, clearly, "I can't keep an eye on him." Matteo stepped forward, his face tight, his voice muffled, as if he was trying to sound reasonable. "Listen, Barbara, it's only for 2 weeks. We really need this break, and I really need to recover from a broken leg," I replied, pointing to the cast. "Sorry, but no." Paula's face turned to stone. "You're being ridiculous. It's just a leg," she exclaimed. I raised an eyebrow and pointed to the cast. "Broken leg, Paula. I can barely take care of myself. You need to find someone else." Paula's face turned red, her lips trembled with rage. "We don't have anyone else." Mom and Dad are busy with repairs. This is not my problem, I repeated again and began to slowly close the door. At that moment, Mateo abruptly stepped forward and stuck his foot in the doorway. His voice, restrained but strained, sounded hollow. You can't just leave us like this. I'm not leaving you. I say no to an unreasonable request. Paula suddenly became calculating, and, measuring me with a look that read cold determination, as if she was already hatching a plan in her head how to get rid of this problem with minimal consequences for herself, she said, "Good. We'll just leave Durant here in the hallway." I couldn't believe my ears. What she was about to do was beyond anything imaginable, not just cruel, but perhaps even illegal. "You can't leave him there," I said slowly, steel appearing in my voice for the first time, without the usual gentleness with which I had been communicating with her for years. I felt a flash of anger, hot as molten metal, coursing through my veins. "If you leave your child on my doorstep, I will call the police. They take child abandonment very seriously, Paula. You could lose custody." Her eyes widened in shock, the pupils turning into tiny dots, as if she had just realized that I really wasn't joking. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered, but her voice faltered. "Try with me," I said, keeping my voice steady and clear as a gunshot. "I've told you over and over again that I can't take care of him. If you leave him anyway, it will be abandoning the child." Durant, who had been silent and wary of watching the adults bicker, began to look scared, clutching his dinosaur-shaped backpack tightly in his hands, as if it were his only anchor in a world that suddenly began to crumble. "You're ruining everything," exclaimed Paula, and her voice broke into tears. Tears sprang from her eyes with such fury, as if they were squeezed out not by pain, but by anger, not by despair, but by wounded pride. "Our anniversary, our trip." I refused to be manipulated, I interrupted her. With every word I felt that Barbara, who had been sleeping for so many years, giving in, sacrificing herself for the sake of peace, strengthening in me. "You are the ones who planned the vacation without first taking care of who will look after the child. It's on you, Paula, not me." And with that, I slammed the door in their faces, bracing myself against it with trembling hands, not allowing myself to hesitate. I heard Paula cry out in indignation, and then the thought of her foot hitting a tree. "You're stupid." Her voice rose to a screech. She screamed, kicked the door again so hard that it shook in the jamb. I heard Durant start to cry, startled by his mother's outburst of anger, a strangled, childish sob that pierced me sharper than any of her words. "You're going to regret this," shouted Paula. I watched through the peephole as they finally turned around and sped down the hallway, Durant doing his best to keep up with his mother's angry pace, mincing after her on short legs. When they were out of sight, I slowly leaned against the door, my heart pounding like crazy, blood pounding in my temples. I've never confronted my sister like this before. I hobbled to the kitchen, cursing every step for the pain in my leg, and put the kettle on, deciding to make myself a cup of hot chocolate to calm my nerves a little. My hands were shaking as I poured the powder and marshmallows, and even when I raised the mug to my lips, it was shaking in my fingers, as if I had just experienced an earthquake. About an hour later, the phone rang again. "Mom is on the screen." I ignored it. Then Dad. I ignored him too. Then there were a series of text messages, first from my mother, then from my father. I didn't read any of them. Finally, a long message came from my mom, and something about the length and sharpness of her words made me read it. "Barbara, you're a terrible daughter. Your sister is devastated by your selfishness. They went on vacation anyway and left Durant with us. Now we have to suspend the renovation of Paula's house because we have to look after our grandson. It's all because of you and your selfishness. From now on, we don't want any contact with you. You are no longer part of this family." I reread the message twice, and then, to my own surprise, I laughed, loudly, sincerely, even with some relief, as if I finally realized that all this time I had been living in the shadow of conditional love, which disappears at the first refusal. They tried to cut off contact with me. It was supposed to be a punishment. The irony was that I felt like a mountain had been lifted off my shoulders. Without hesitation, I blocked all their numbers: mother, father, Paula, and Matteo. It was surprisingly easy, like flipping a switch, like cutting out a tumor that had been growing in me for years, poisoning every step. The following weekend, my mother's sister, Aunt Linda, called me. We were always close, although we didn't talk much. She lived on the other side of the country. "Barbara, dear," she began, her voice warm but worried, "I just heard from your mother that you're not talking anymore. She says you were very selfish." I sighed. Let me guess, she didn't mention that I broke my leg, and no one from the family even came to check on me? There was a pause. "Did you break your leg?" she asked softly. I told her everything, about the accident, about my parents' reaction, about Paula's demands and the confrontation at my door. When I finished, Linda said, "Oh, Barbara. I'm so sorry. Your mother just told everyone that you refused to help your sister for no reason. It puts everything in a completely different light." That's what I thought. "I'm not really surprised," I said, looking into the mud where the marshmallows had already melted. "I'll make sure the rest of the family finds out what really happened," Aunt Linda promised, her voice sounding determined. "You don't have to worry about what they think. But I can't stand the thought of your mother spreading lies about you." "Thank you, Aunt Linda." "I appreciate it," I whispered, feeling for the first time in a long time that someone was really standing by my side. After I hung up, I was sitting on the balcony watching the sunset, and there was something surprisingly peaceful about the flickering crimson light spreading across the clouds, as if the sky itself had decided to share my sense of inner liberation with me, as if it understood that it was at this moment that I am letting go not only of the pain caused by the accident, but also of the heavy, suffocating legacy of the emotional burden that I carried for years, not even allowing myself to admit. How much it exhausted me from the inside. I've been thinking about the last 2 months and how much has changed, not only externally, in my daily life, but much more deeply, in my perception of myself, people, and what I deserve. Yes, I broke my leg, but in some strange, almost mystical sense, this accident freed me, as if it gave me a reason to finally stop, look inside myself and see who really cared about me, and who only created the illusion of intimacy, hiding their indifference or self-interest. After my conversation with Aunt Linda, I felt relieved. Not that I cared much about what my relatives thought, but it was nice to know that someone who really knows me, who saw me as a child, teenager, adult woman, does not believe the unfounded accusations that someone he stands up for me, not out of a sense of duty, but out of love and understanding. As the weeks passed, my recovery continued steadily, as if my body itself, sensing that I was no longer surrounded by emotional parasites, decided to heal faster, with newfound energy and strength. Physical therapy with Marcus was the highlight of the week. His attentiveness, patience, and subtle sense of humor made each session not only useful, but also almost desirable. He pushed me just enough to make progress without overdoing it, always sensitively picking up my signals of fatigue or pain. By the end of the second month after the accident, I was already walking with a slight limp, and although every step reminded me of my recent vulnerability, every step was also a triumph, a victory over circumstances, over my former self. The doctor said I could go back to work, although I should still be careful on the stairs and avoid sharp turns. My first day back at the office was surprisingly emotional. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I saw my desk decorated with "Welcome Back" signs, and to my delighted amazement, Sarah organized a small party with a cake that read, "Welcome Back, Jump Together," in blue glaze. And this childish pun made me smile wider than anything I've worn in recent months. "We've missed you here," Jess said, giving me a gentle hug, and there was so much warmth in that hug that I wanted to stay in it longer than was decent. Rachel handed me a coffee, her signature, with cinnamon and vanilla, and added, "The place wasn't the same without you, especially complaining about the coffee in the break room." I laughed, sincerely, freely, with that aching feeling when you realize that you are really welcome. "Well, it's still terrible," I joked, "but at least now I'm in good company." It was pleasant, even inspiring, to return to my work routine. The Jenkins project was completed without me, And although I was a little worried that I had missed out on a lot, my colleagues quickly pulled me into new tasks, and I was looking forward to when I could really plunge into work. After staying at home for several weeks, I realized how much I really love my work, not only for its content, but also for its sense of structure, meaning, and belonging. A few days after returning, I received a message from Aunt Linda. "I just had lunch with your cousin Emma, everything is clear. She sends you her love and asks you to call her sometimes." It was unexpectedly touching, and over the next few weeks I received several more similar messages, from distant relatives whom I barely remembered, from those whom I saw maybe once every few years at family meetings, and although their words of support were pleasant, they did not touch me to the core. The opinion, while appreciated, didn't really change my daily life. What really mattered were the friends who showed up when I needed them. Rachel and Jess were my support, my quiet refuge from the outside world, but others intervened. My neighbor, Mr. Chen, started bringing me groceries once a week, without asking, without expecting gratitude, just with a kind nod. My college friend Alicia, who lives on the other side of town, sent me parcels with books, goodies, and letters. Even the barista at the local coffee shop saved my favorite muffin for me when I finally managed to hobble there for the first time after the accident. One evening, about 3 months after the accident, Rachel, Jess, and I were having dinner at my house, at a table where we were laughing, remembering stupid things, and discussing summer plans, when Rachel suddenly, a little uncertainly, asked, "Listen, have you heard anything from your parents or your sister?" I shook my head. "No, there hasn't been a sound since I blocked their numbers. Aunt Linda says they're still scolding me to anyone who's willing to listen." In a soft, almost apologetic tone, Jess asked the following question: "Does it bother you?" I thought about it, biting my lip, allowing myself a moment of silence. Honestly, not as much as I expected. It's like I've already accepted that they'll never change. And yes, it hurts. But it's liberating. Rachel raised her glass, in which the light from the lamp was playing merrily, for toxic family members. May they remain in a difficult position forever. We all laughed and clinked glasses, as if with this ringing we were consolidating not just an evening, but a certain new stage, a stage where I no longer ask for the love that they are not ready to give me. That evening, after they left, I stood on the balcony again, looking at the lights of the city twinkling in the distance like promises, and thought about how much could change in a matter of weeks if you let yourself stop holding on to something that no longer gives warmth. My leg was healing well, and it only caused me trouble when I exerted myself too much or when it was raining, but the physical pain subsided. And surprisingly, the emotional pain also subsided, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a wave receding after a storm, retreating from the shore, leaving behind clean, washed sand. For many years, perhaps even from early childhood, I tried to earn the love and approval of my family, hoping that if I was good enough, comfortable enough, obedient enough, then one day they would notice me not as a shadow of my sister, but as a separate person worthy of love, recognition, and respect. I sat with the kids when Paula asked, and it didn't matter that I had my own things to do, that I was tired or sick. I always gave up everything to be around, maybe to earn another tiny point in their imaginary family loyalty system. I listened to my mother's criticism without complaint, swallowing resentments, trying not to argue, not to defend myself, because any objection immediately turned into another reason to accuse me of ingratitude. I've come to terms with the fact that I'll always be second in importance to Paula, in conversations, in gifts, in memories, even in photographs. But strangely enough, it was the broken leg that made me say no for the first time in a long time, firmly, clearly, without explanation or apology. And that changed everything. When spring turned to summer, when the city was filled with color, the sound of fountains and the smells of flowering lime trees, I found myself accepting my new freedom with the greed of a man who had not been allowed to breathe deeply for too long. I joined a book club that met on Wednesday evenings in a cozy coffee shop on the corner. I would not have been able to afford such a luxury before, because it was on Wednesdays that Paula most often asked me to babysit. I signed up for cooking classes on weekends, learning how to whip whites to the right peaks and season sauces like real chefs. I started dating again, not to fill the void, but because I felt whole and ready to share that integrity with someone. And even, for the first time in many years, I planned a trip to the coast alone, without looking back, without having to coordinate dates, without fear that someone would have to explain why I was not available. Sometimes I thought about Durant. He was just a kid caught in the middle of all this family drama, too young to understand, too innocent to deserve this chaos. I hoped my parents were at least kind to him while they were looking after him. Maybe when he gets older, we can build a relationship apart from his parents, in silence, in trust, in freedom from prejudice. I wish that one day. On a Saturday morning in July, almost 6 months after my accident, I was at the farmer's market, picking ripe peaches and fresh mint, when I thought I caught a glimpse of Paula in the crowd, a tall figure, a familiar curve of the neck, a similar gait. My heart started pounding for a moment, and then stopped when the woman turned around and I realized it wasn't her. I was surprised to realize that I felt disappointed. Some small, forgotten part of me still hoped that it was her, that maybe she had changed, that she wanted to apologize, to try to restore what once connected us. But that was unlikely. People like my sister and my parents rarely admit they're wrong. Pride and fear of losing control prevent them from doing so. They'll probably go to their graves thinking that I was an egotist who offended them for no reason. And that was okay. I couldn't control what they thought or said about me. I could only control my own actions and choices, and that was my strength. That evening, I met up with friends for dinner at a new restaurant in the city center. The place was noisy, trendy, with soft lighting and long wine lists. I looked around the table at these people who genuinely cared about me, who showed up when I needed them, who respected my boundaries, who loved me for being, not comfortable, not perfect, but real, sometimes tired, sometimes sarcastic, sometimes touched by tears, but always by myself. I was truly grateful, not feigning, not for showing off, but as grateful as a person who has survived the storm and found shelter. 2 weeks later, Aunt Linda called with the news. She sounded apologetic in advance, as if she was preparing to tell me something ridiculous. Your mother tells people that you asked her for reconciliation, but she refused. I laughed, and it wasn't angry or sarcastic, but light, almost liberated. It's creative, I replied, putting the cup down. I haven't unblocked their numbers. That's what I thought, Linda sighed. I thought for a moment, and for the first time in a long time, I answered without hesitation, actually, I'm fine. And I realized that I really meant it. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of hot chocolate, which was still my favorite soothing drink, and settled down on the couch with a book. My leg was almost completely healed, with only occasional stiffness on cold days. Life wasn't perfect, work was stressful sometimes, dating had its ups and downs sometimes, and my apartment still needed a new coat of paint, but for the first time in my life, I felt at peace. I wasn't expecting a phone call demanding my time. I wasn't prepared for criticism. I didn't make myself smaller so as not to rock the boat. I was just Barbara, imperfectly healing and finally free to live on my own terms. Sometimes the worst accidents lead to the best results. Sometimes you have to break down before you can heal properly. And sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you were born into. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.